Hey there, people. Welcome to episode number 5 of our Under the Radar Real Estate podcast with your host, Joshua Jean-Baptiste, broker with Sage Real Estate and Garrison Collective. On today's show, we are going to be talking about the under the radar neighborhood of Briar Hill. We are then going to jump into our power rankings and kind of see where all the under the radar neighborhoods stack up this month. There were some changes. It'll be very interesting to see where things land. We're then going to jump into our real estate tip segment and talk about buying like an investor. We are then going to jump over to our under the radar real estate tech segment. We're back into smart home devices this week, talking about moisture and water detectors. Very, very, very interesting product out there that a lot of people don't think about. And then lastly, we're just going to jump into our Garrison Collective Market Minute, talk about the overall GTA real estate market. We're going to focus in on the city of Toronto, though. So let's jump right into things. So let's go to Briar Hill. So Briar Hill is a neighborhood in the northwest corner of the city of Toronto, like most under the radar neighborhoods. So it's roughly bounded by Caledonia over in the west. We have about then it goes to just under Glencairn in the north, Allen Road in the east, and Eglinton in the south. So Briar Hill is a neighborhood fairly diverse in terms of its makeup. It runs through the heart of Little Jamaica, but then as you go into the neighborhood, you have Italian demographic. You have the Zito's Marketplace, which is a great Italian grocery store kind of in the heart of the neighborhood. The neighborhood's also known for its design district at Castlefield and Caledonia. So if any people out there have done any renovations to their house or had to buy tiles or appliances or anything home related, Castlefield and Caledonia is the place to be, the place to go with some of the best furniture and home supplies stores probably in the GTA, all concentrated in that little corner. So very interesting pocket of the city. So let's jump into the numbers of the neighborhood and find out just why this neighborhood might be flying under the radar for most real estate buyers. So let's jump right into things. So for those of you watching on YouTube, you can watch the screen right here. So we're going to hop into our sold report. So last month, there hasn't been much that sold in the neighborhood. I mean, it's a topic that we'll get to at the end of the podcast when we look at the overall state of the market. There hasn't been a lot of activity in the market because there isn't a lot of listings. So last month, we had 4 detached houses sell for an average selling price of just over 1.2 million, which is 9% above last April. There were 4 listings sold, as we said. Average selling price to list price was 105%. Now, most of that is just due to the way properties are marketed. Generally, agents like to underprice the properties in the hopes of getting multiple bids and bidding the price up a little higher. However, if we look at the 1.2 million, houses didn't really go over market value, in my opinion. They kind of hit their market value. So it's more of a marketing tactic to get a lot of showings and a lot of buyers through the door. Properties took about 13 days to sell, and the sales to new listing ratio was 40%. So that means 40% of all new listings that hit the market sold. So when we look at detached houses in Briar Hill versus the overall city of Toronto, you can see here, for those of you watching on YouTube, that the average was for the city of Toronto was about just under 1.7 at 1.686 million, versus the average in Briar Hill, which is just over 1.2. So there's quite a large gap there in price, it's pretty plain to see. So and for a neighborhood that, like most of these under radar neighborhoods in the Northwest pocket, is going to be getting, Briar Hill actually runs between 3 of the brand new Crosstown LRT subway stations. So you are going to have amazing access to rapid transit in this neighborhood very soon. So to be able to get a detached house in this neighborhood for under 1.3 million, when the average in the city of Toronto is almost 1.7, it's a no-brainer that this is an under the radar neighborhood for real estate in this city. When we look at semi-detached houses, I mean, we can look at it quickly. There's only one house that sold for just over $1 million. There aren't a lot of semis in the neighborhood. I mean, when the neighborhood was founded way back in time, most of the homes were bungalows and detached houses. So there weren't a lot of semis built there from its founding. So most of the semis that are available are generally newer semis that were built over the last 20 to 30 years. Actually, most of them probably in the last 10 to 15 years. So there's not a lot of product there. One sold in 56 days for 100% of the sales to new listing ratio because there's only one listing and one sale. So, but again, if we look at it at the one sale, even just comparing it to the average in the city of Toronto, right? We're looking at the average in the city of Toronto at almost 1.3 million at 1.26 million versus just about a million. There's a pretty large gap in price, and shows again why this is an under the radar neighborhood. What I'm really excited about in this area is condos. Average selling price was $685,000. There was 5 listings that sold. Average selling price, list price, 99%, so almost 100%. So people are getting their list price for the most part. Days on market, 16, and sales to new listing ratio, 63%, which is pretty high. So I mean, 63% of the listings are getting absorbed. So when new listings hit the market, 63% of them are getting absorbed, which is a pretty high rate. So when we look at this compared to the city of Toronto, so not as much of a gap in terms of dollar amount versus housing, right? So housing, you're getting a significant discount in the neighborhood versus houses in the rest of the city. When we look here, the average in the city of Toronto, 751,000 versus here they have it 645. This is using the composite score versus the average price. So the average composite 645 versus 751. So it's about $100,000 gap, so not as much as houses. But if you think about the type of property that is selling, so if we look over here at the average square footage, we're looking at condos. So those of you who are on YouTube, you can see average size in the neighborhood of Briar Hill is about 900 square feet. So there's two of the properties that sold over 1,000 square feet. There was one that sold was between 9 to 1,000 square feet, and only 2 smaller units. Now, the overall city of Toronto, most of the sales of condos typically tend to be a lot smaller. So we're probably looking at an average of closer to 700 square feet. So when we look at the price gap, there's actually quite a large gap in price because you're getting a lot more for your money in Briar Hill versus other neighborhoods in the city. So again, it's very clear to see that Briar Hill is a truly under the radar neighborhood, especially considering the amount of transit that's coming to the neighborhood and the amount of great neighborhood amenities that already exist in Briar Hill. So when we think about Briar Hill, I mean, we already talked about the design district that's right there. You also have Little Jamaica, so you have the great culture, the Caribbean culture right there. You have the neighborhood anchor of Zito's Marketplace, and there's other great Italian restaurants and grocery stores in the pocket. You have a little bit of everything. I mean, I have a favorite sushi place that's in Briar Hill. I can't think of and pretty much any kind of food you want, you can get in Briar Hill, which is great. So definitely a neighborhood worth checking out, and most certainly a neighborhood that's under the radar. So let's now get into the new construction in the area. We are looking at just under 3,000 new units, various levels of development. So we have some stuff completing right now. So you have the Fairbank, which is a rental building being built right at Caledonia and Eglinton. You have Oban Flats, the Fairbank building is done by Oban Flats. And then we have Clifton Blake that is completing 2 rental buildings on Eglinton, right near Dufferin. They're bringing, I think, like about 300 units between the 2 buildings to that corner. And then we have the developer Royal Park Homes They're just completing a 9-story building with about 100 units. It's called 8 House at 2433 Dufferin. So that building is completing right now. I walk by the site and drive by the site every day. Looks like it's ready for occupancy probably any second now. I wouldn't be surprised if you can get into the building as we speak. And then there's a lot of interesting new development coming to the area. So at right now, there's a lot of stuff in the planning phase. There's a couple that I'm really excited about. There's one right at the corner of Castlefield and Dufferin, and that is by Republic Developments. For those on YouTube, I'm pulling it up right now. It looks like it will be an absolutely stunning building right at the corner of Dufferin and Castlefield. The size of the building's 400,000 square feet in total, 462 units. IBI Group is the architect. It's going to be a mixed-use building which is going to have like townhouses and stuff at the base with some retail, some office, and yeah, it's going to add a ton to that corner. Right now, it's just a car dealership at that corner, so we're going to be seeing that beautiful new building come up and add almost 500 new homes to the area, which is great. And also it will support a lot of the development being built. So it's going to be just steps up the street from the new Fairbank LRT station. So really excited about that development. There's a few others. So we have a slightly smaller development right here at 1141 Roselawn. Again, in the very, very early stages of development. I mean, the developer doesn't even have any photos of the development up on their website yet, but it is a kind of a mid-rise building. I'm just pulling up the stats right here. 11-story building, 133 units. It backs onto the rail path, which is no longer an active railway. It's a cycling path that cuts through midtown of the city. So I've done the bike ride on the rail path before. You can get to the core of the city, to Yonge and Eglinton. If I'm focused and not on a joyride or not trying to wrangle my boys, I can get downtown in like 10 minutes. Get to the midtown, Yonge and Eglinton in like 10 minutes on the bike path if I'm really just focused and moving down that path. So, and that'll be right off the back of your building at that. So I'm really excited about those two projects, kind of right in the core of Briar Hill. Certainly an area worth keeping an eye on. So we've created a little map. So those of you on YouTube, you can see it right here. So if you're interested in having access to the map, we can keep you updated on any of the other new developments that pop up in the neighborhood, or if you're interested in some of the new development going on right now, definitely hit us up. And hit us up if you're just interested in any of the resale coming up in the neighborhood. Again, super under the radar. You're saving, I mean, if you look at detached houses, saving $300,000-$400,000 looking in this neighborhood versus the overall city of Toronto. So certainly an area you want to keep an eye on. And that brings me to the power rankings for this month. So let me pull this up right here. And those of you who are watching the podcast, you can see it right here. The power rankings for this month. So we're looking at, in the number one spot is Fairbank. So as you saw from the last podcast, Fairbank was near the bottom, and they jumped up to the top. So we use the sales to new listing ratio for our power rankings. So how quickly things are selling, right? So what we saw in Fairbank was we saw an uptick in inventory. So with the sales to new listing, it's funny how things go. A lot of times sellers will notice, and realtors, I mean, most realtors are, like myself, are fairly intelligent. You know when things are moving quickly. So I'm sure a lot of agents who have clients in Fairbank were quick to point out to their sellers that, hey, everything that's going up right now in Fairbank is selling. List your place now. A lot of the sellers took that advice and they listed quite a few more properties in Fairbank. So right now there is a decent amount of inventory in the neighborhood. So certainly a neighborhood that is under the radar, and a neighborhood that maybe you want to check out because there is some inventory now in Fairbank. Mount Dennis moved from number 1 to number 2, so still a very under the radar area at a 36 on the sales to new listing ratio. We then saw Oakwood jump up and Briar Hill. Again, if you watched or listened to last month's podcast, they were lower on the list. They've jumped up, kind of the same thing. People probably noticed, hey, there wasn't a lot out there. Let me list my house now because there's not a lot out there. And then we saw Weston and Carlton Village drop down to the bottom of the power rankings. Very, very tight in terms of inventory in those areas. People are starting to catch on to both of those neighborhoods as under the radar areas, and things picked up. So all the inventory that was there got snapped up, and now it's created a tighter environment in those two pockets. However, from a pricing perspective, all of these neighborhoods are still trending well under the Toronto average when we look at price. So while this is a fun list, we look at month to month, price-wise are all still very much under the radar neighborhoods. So yeah, good to check out the power rankings. We kind of see where things stack up right now. Again, to summarize, Fairbank, Mount Dennis, Oakwood, Briar Hill are some hot spots right now if you're looking for a little less competition, a little more inventory, and a little bit more choice. Because it's the Under the Radar Real Estate podcast, I mean, a lot of you listening or watching understand that we are looking at areas of the city and neighborhoods that people don't typically think of. I mean, the average real estate buyer, when you're buying real estate or renting real estate for yourself. So a lot of times when people buy or rent or look for new housing, it's very emotional, right? You attach yourself to things you know. You tend to follow current trends in the market. You tend to follow kind of where the best restaurants, where the best shops are, where perhaps if you went to university or college, the areas that kind of like touch your soul, touch your heart a little bit, areas you used to party, areas you used to hang out. Anyhow, a lot of these areas with the best schools, a lot of these areas, because most people think the same way about them, typically tend to be pricier neighborhoods, right? So from an investment standpoint, it can be pretty tough to make a good return on these neighborhoods. Now, if you're planning on buying a house, money's not an issue, and you're never going to sell it, 100% buy into a trendy neighborhood. You're not necessarily worried about resale value. You're only worried about some of the other things we just mentioned. However, as realtors, we kind of know this ourselves. When people talk about forever homes typically tend to be a 7 to 10 year hold. So if 10 years is considered forever, at some point you will have to look at selling your property and moving somewhere else. So with that, one of the under the radar things that I like to talk about with my clients is to kind of think like an investor when you're buying. So when you're looking at real estate for yourself, you don't know what kind of, life happens. So you don't know what kind of life changes you will face at some point in your journey of owning property, right? So it could be a job promotion where you have to be relocated to another part of the city or another country, and you may have to sell your home and move or rent it out. You could have a sudden injection of cash. You got a promotion, and all of a sudden now you're like, hey, well, I love the house I'm in right now, but I'm making some more money. I could buy a larger property or a second property or whatever. So it could, again, affect whether you hold on to or dispose of that property. There could be some unfortunate things that happen. There could be job loss. There could be breakups, divorce, all that kind of stuff that happens where a property needs to be sold. So when we think about these things, it sometimes is good to put yourself into the mind of an investor when you are buying. Not saying completely only look at the investment value of a home, but taking these things into account so that way if you do need to sell the property, you're still getting a pretty decent return, and you're not walking away with either a negative on the balance sheet where you're selling the property for less than what you purchased, or in some cases just like a break even where you're not making any extra. So when you're looking to sell that property, it is nice to be in a situation where you are ahead a little bit, and if you can beat the market even a little bit more, especially if you're looking into a move up purchase, right? If you're looking to buy like a condo and you're moving to a house, or you're going to a townhouse and you're moving to a semi to a detached, and you have a little bit of that extra capital because every category of house you move up to generally costs a little bit more money. So if you made some money on the back end when you sold your property because you thought like an investor, and then you moved up and you moved ahead, it puts you in a better spot. So let's move on to our next segment, which is under the radar tech. So in under the radar tech this week, we're going to be talking about a smart home device, which are moisture and water detectors. So as a real estate agent, I can tell you right now that water is the number one enemy of homeowners. I could say very easily, probably 100% of my clients have dealt with moisture or water in some way, shape, or form. We live in Canada, and most of our houses have basements, and basements are generally made out of porous materials, whether it be concrete or brick or other types of masonry. They aren't 100% waterproof, so they do let in some moisture. So basements always have water. You can be in tough situations where perhaps you're in a spot where there's a high water table and you actually have water penetration, not just moisture, but real water coming through your foundation. You can have leaks in a house, burst pipes, leaking roofs. Water can come in from anywhere. So what do you do about it, right? It's something that as a homeowner or even an apartment and condo owner, you deal with. It's not just limited to people who own houses. Tons of my clients who also own condos, we've had issues with water leaks, whether it be in the building or a neighbor who left their dishwasher on and running and they had a leak that it leaked into their unit. Tons of different ways for water to get into your dwelling. So short of creating a impenetrable barrier to your house and wrapping every single piece of plumbing in your house with some waterproof material, it's almost impossible to not have to deal with moisture water in your house. So what can you do about it? Well, there's a lot, and now because we've moved on to a point in technology where we have so many smart devices, there are tons of smart devices like a smoke detector or carbon monoxide can detect certain levels of water. So if you pull up this article from Wired right here, they show a couple of different options. So for those of you watching on YouTube, you can see it right here. But they're devices that can actually detect water, the presence of water, whether it be dripping water or even just moisture levels. So you place these little devices in different areas around your house where there can be likely leaks, right? So you'll place these in places like under the sink or in the laundry room, down in your basement where all the plumbing goes, right? So near your hot water tank, perhaps near your furnace or AC where there's places where water can condense. And there's a whole bunch of different devices to choose from, right? There's individual devices. There's some devices where you can put sensors kind of all over your house, right? So there's one here by YoLink. It's good for large properties because you can put these little water sensors all over your house in different places where water can potentially come in. And if it detects the presence of leaking water or elevated humidity, it will send you then an alert to your phone so that you know that, hey, there might be a leak in this section. Go investigate, go check it out. And even if you don't want to spend money on water sensors, a lot of you watching this probably have a smart thermostat. A lot of the smart thermostats can also detect, not as accurately as one of these water sensors where you're putting it near a water source, but a smart thermostat, especially the ones that have multiple sensors, can sometimes even detect higher levels of humidity in a house, which is also go into the settings of your app for your smart thermostat and look at those moisture sensors and perhaps set up an alert, because if the humidity level starts rising in your house, it could sometimes indicate that there's a leak somewhere or there's an issue with moisture somewhere in the house. But if we get back to the water sensors, this is something that I think most homeowners or even renters, it's a worthwhile investment, because the thing is with water, as we all know, so the first thing with water is that, yeah, it can create a lot of damage very, very quickly. And it's one of the worst things to possibly clean up in your dwelling. It just always creates a mess wherever it goes. However, sometimes when you have just small leaks, that can almost sometimes be worse than just like a flood, because generally with small leaks, you don't notice it. Right? So small leaks over time, those of you who understand mold and how mold creates, if you have a constant little dripper, like an area or a certain material like drywall or wood is exposed to moisture for an elongated period of time, it can start creating mold. And then when you have mold, that just creates other issues, environmental issues. No one wants to be breathing in mold spores and so on and so forth. So when you have these detectors in your house, you can kind of detect those elevated water levels or moisture readings or humidity readings and nip some problems in the bud before it becomes a larger issue. Especially, and one thing to even consider is like in a new house to get some of these moisture, because if you have a brand new house, a lot of times you have warranty, right? But the warranty is 1 to 2 years for defects, 7 years for major structural issues. It'd be good to detect some of these issues that you can't see and the builder can't see. But if if your detector starts picking up an elevated moisture sensor in one area of your house, even if it's a brand new house, you can then get the builder to come in and fix that issue free of charge. Well, not free of charge, they have to pay for it, but it's part of your warranty. Certainly something that all dwellers, people who either own or rent real estate, should be investing their money into, because it can save you a lot of headaches down the road in dealing with moisture and water in your home. So lastly, let's just jump into the kind of overall market. The Toronto market is still, when I talk to my clients, I just kind of say it's still a bit of a weird place right now. So overall, I mean, most neighborhoods are kind of seeing a bit of a resurgence in price. A lot of that is due to inventory. So when we look at just a kind of a snapshot of where things are at in the overall GTA, sales are still down over last year, about 5%. So last year, this time we saw just under 8,000 sales at 7,940. This year there was 7,500 sales. And to put that in perspective, some of our busiest months, especially over the course of the pandemic or prior to the pandemic, we've seen 10 to 12,000 sales in a month in some of our busiest months. And typically April is a busy month. So historically, 7,500 is pretty low in terms of overall sales when we look historic numbers. New listings are down 38% and active listings down 20%. So new and active listings being down, those types of numbers puts a lot of pressure on the current inventory in the market. We're not seeing, so last year we saw 18,000 new listings hit the market in April, and this year we only saw 11,000. So there was 7,000 less listings for probably, and this is anecdotal, but I would probably say there's probably more active buyers in the market April this year than there was April last year, because April last year was when we started feeling the shocks of the rate increases. So a lot of buyers were pulling back and saying, hey, let me wait and see what's going on here, right? Rates are going up. I don't want to jump right into the market at this point. So there were less buyers, but there were a lot more listings. This year, we're seeing the inverse of that. We're seeing more buyers because rates have come down a little bit and they look like they're going to be kind of stabilized or perhaps even dropping a little bit more, but we're seeing a lot less listing activity, which is a little concerning when we then look at kind of supply demand and what this will do to pricing in Toronto. Average price, I mean, when we look year over year, yes, down 7.8%. But when we look at month over month, in last podcast, I talked about that being month over month is a more interesting statistic as a buyer right now. So if you're looking for real estate right now, you want to look at month to month because it gives you a better indication of kind of where things are trending. So with all those tight conditions, when we look at March to April, prices have gone up about 50,000. So while we're down 8% year over year, we're actually up 4% month over month. And the prior month, we were also up about 4% month over month. And then even from January to February, we were up a couple percentage points month over month. So we're kind of seeing the trend in 2023 that the pricing increases are starting to come back. So 2022, it was all about price levels coming down, right? We saw the rate increases and prices were coming down from historic highs. We saw records in January and February of 2022, and prices came down from there, with the biggest shock being from May to June in last year. But this year, it's looking like the trend is going the other way. So we're starting to see numbers progressively increase month over month. And I wouldn't be shocked by the fall where we're going to start seeing year over year numbers start to increase as well, because last fall was pretty much the bottom of the market in the city of Toronto. So how do you deal with this as a buyer in today's market? Well, it's tough. A lot of the price increases are going to be in some of the trendy areas. So you're watching the right podcast if you're looking to try and beat this. Because again, under the radar neighborhoods, these neighborhoods haven't hit their peak yet in terms of where pricing can go, right? So as a smart buyer, it could be worth looking into some of these neighborhoods where the growth factors are there, right? You can buy a property at X amount of dollars and see increased growth over the overall city of the overall market that you're looking at, right? So that's number one. Number two is being ready to act, right? So as a buyer out there, making sure all your ducks are in a row, making sure that your financing is solid, make sure you have your mortgage rates locked in, making sure that you're doing your proper pre-due diligence on any properties you're looking at, and being aggressive right now, right? If prices are going up, they don't seem to be likely coming down anytime soon. So it's good to kind of be proactive. If you're on the fence, if you're looking to buy right now, jump in right. If you can, try and jump in as soon as possible to then get in before the prices really start to move upwards. And then if you're looking at buying and selling, sometimes it could be worth, whereas going into now, we're very much in a scenario where it was probably a better case to sell first and buy later, because you're selling in a market that is decreasing. So sometimes a prudent move is to sell first, try and know exactly what you're working with and buy later. Now we're starting to head back into an environment where it could be worth buying first and then taking advantage of an increasing marketplace where the prices are increasing slightly and maybe able to ride that wave higher. It's a riskier move. Personally, I don't necessarily always recommend it, but if you're looking to, if you truly believe the market is moving in a certain direction, could be an interesting move as well. That's it for this month's podcast. If you like the podcast, please give us a follow. We are live on YouTube. We're on Instagram. We are actually going to be up on Apple Podcasts very soon. So give us a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you're interested in buying or selling real estate, not only in any of the under the radar neighborhoods that we cover, but anywhere in the city of Toronto, myself and my team would love to be your real estate resource. Please hit us up anytime via email, text, via DMs on social media. We'd be more than happy to help you on your real estate journey. That's it for today. This has been episode 5. Peace out.